Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers. Today we're going to talk about building testing teams. I'm joined by some familiar faces. Chris.
Hello, hello.
David.
Hiya.
Russell.
Hello.
And I'm Simon. Before we start, here's a quick message from our sponsor. Saffron QA continue to be our sponsor, and they are also here to support the testing community. Therefore, should any of our listeners be in the market for a new job in testing or hire new talent for your team, please reach out to Ben. He can be contacted via email at ben@saffronqa.co.uk. Mr. Banter, over to you. Christopher.
Have you told everyone what we're talking about today?
I did. I started that at the beginning.
I wasn't really listening to you.
No,
anyway,
first.
So not paying attention to things is sometimes the reason for there being plot twists, but also plot twists sometimes come at you from anywhere. In books, music, sports stories, TV shows. Have you got a favourite plot twist? Something that took you by surprise, something that you really enjoyed, something that sticks in your mind when you think of plot twists?
Well, my favourite programme at the moment is The Traitors, and there are so many plot twists as part of that. The whole voting and the round table. Well, it's partly the editing, the clever editing, so you get an idea that things might go one particular way, and then it doesn't. And the point of it, of trying to find the traitors, is quite frustrating or quite enlightening as a viewer, because it can take a very different direction as part of the voting compared to what the discussion was and what you expect. Yeah, that's probably, and every episode seems to be very similar, or not very similar, because sometimes it does go the way that you expect it. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I've got a couple. I started watching Game of Thrones before I'd read the books, so there was a few twists in that completely took me by surprise. The Red Wedding being the first one that I can really think of. And the other thing I would say from plot twist perspective, and this will be right up Chris's street, is there's been several wrestling events over the years where I've not seen the ending. WrestleMania 17 is the one that always sticks in my head the most. I won't go into detail. If people want to find out more, feel free to come and chat to me and Chris another time. Don't want to bore David and Russell with the details, but yeah, those would be the two that stick in my head. First time I've got wrestling into the podcast, I think.
Well done. Chris is proud.
Yes.
I have to say that plot twists aren't something that stick with me. I can't remember any.
Can I have a second one? Then?
Go for it. You can have my slot.
The other plot twist that was really memorable was The Sixth Sense. And I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but yeah, I watched it with my kids recently, and yeah, they really enjoyed it as well. And it was really unexpected.
There's a lot of murder mysteries, isn't there? They're quite good ones for that.
They are, yeah.
I do have one. I was thinking Fight Club.
Hey.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, that was the one that, if anything, I can actually remember. So yeah, that must have been a good one.
Yay.
There's the final scene, I think, or near enough final scene in the lift in The Departed. I remember thinking I knew what would happen, and there was a bit of a gunshot and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not going to end like that. It's about as much of the spoilers I'll give away. There, I seem to remember that one kind of threw me. But like I was saying, the things like murder mysteries, often you think you've got it sussed. They often have several plot twists to take you through, like, you know who the person's going to be, and then it isn't that person, but or maybe is it, or is this person a good person, a bad person? You don't trust anybody. They're quite interesting.
I read a lot of crime fiction as well, and it is you get excited when you don't see the plot twist coming. When you've predicted it, it kind of gets to a point where like, oh, okay, it was what I thought. So our topic tonight, we decided we'd talk about creating test teams. I thought this was a good idea to talk about it from a hypothetical perspective. Maybe we can lean on some of our experiences, but I wanted to pose the question to the peers. If you landed a new role and you were the first person in the team as a test manager, QE manager, QA manager, and you were given the task of building the team, what would be your approach? No context given, so there you go. That's
Yeah, well, that's probably the first thing, is obviously understanding the context of the team that you need to build, the purpose, the reason, the value, what is wanted. there's what I would want to do, clearly. I want to be the best quality we can be and so on, but it's understanding the context. We start a startup bank. Are we in this world? Are we creating a kind of a startup exploratory type thing where quality is important but not critical? So it's understanding that a little bit. What my sort of paymasters, I'll start with those, what the people above me want, looking for, what's important potentially for user-based customers. So, where does it actually matter? And then speaking to the tech teams, because I'm assuming they already exist. Usually testers don't get set up at the same time as the developers do. Someone will have written something to start with. So I'll be understanding kind of the tech stack, tech tooling, their desires. I'm assuming they'll want to go fast. They'll want to do continuous deployment, those sorts of things. So that's kind of what I would do, is get that little foundation in first to help me see the direction which potentially we're looking for. Is it, what sort of things will add value fast? Because I'll have my end picture, which will be the perfect teams and the empowered structures and good support systems and so on. But actually, it'll be kind of understanding the operational thing and budgets, costs. I'm going to be only able to spend one. Am I going to have to use external resources? Can we get CapEx or OpEx? What's the model? How far does the funding go? Those sorts of things, I think, would be where I'd start.
You've given all our answers away.
Yeah.
Podcast
You've covered
over.
everything.
Well done, Russell.
That's the podcast end. Yeah, well done.
Well, it wasn't a good episode if that was the only answer. There is a lot more to it than that, though.
I completely agree that context is everything. What's the first thing to do is find out what the perceived end goal. Obviously, if we're working agile, that might not necessarily be the thing you're going, but actually, what is it that what are the risks involved as well? I think also another thing is looking at the pool of people that you're actually being able to pull from. What skills have you got? What size of the team? Russell mentioned a small startup. You might have to have multiple roles as part of that. He also mentioned that you might want to, outsource to other things. But if you're in a certain size company, you might have a certain size people. And so therefore you might need to pick and choose your team based on what's available. They might also be working on other projects. So therefore you need to then sort of find a structure that may not necessarily always get the best people, because also the other thing is you might want to invest in people to develop them. So actually it's choosing the right mix of people with experience to allow them the right skill set to achieve the goal, but also expand and give them interest in particular areas. Because again, some people might have been working on this particular project for years and actually not necessarily gain anything from it or want to actually move on to it, whereas there might be someone less experienced that will relish the chance. And although you might want the maturity and the expertise, actually giving someone the experience to develop then allows more flexibility, because you've got the historical nature, or potentially two people able to then be upskilled rather than just one person as well. So there's a lot there to unpack as well, but I'll leave it there.
So much that you could do. I mean, I guess we've covered things in the past about quality culture, quality being everyone's responsibility, agility, things like that. Those are all questions that we'd want to be uncovering. It's quite hard when you're sort of dreaming of these things to not be weighed with biases. Our experiences where we've been burned, where we've seen successes, and try not to solutionize everything really quickly and go, oh, well, obviously everything would look like what I already know, so I will be able to do blah, blah, blah. For me, success would really determine like what success would look like, would be kind of that sort of, I hate the term North Star. Let's call it the magnetic north. Let's do anything, the thing that you. For me, the most important thing in a quality culture, or a culture of wanting to improve, which is certainly what you would hope if testing's being given time and money and budget. If that was going on, then you would hope that they're looking at that continuous improvement arc and looking to really let you be a part of that change. And that kind of culture, regardless of where they stand in terms of tech stack, in terms of industry, that's what can actually have a spark.
Mm.
That's what can be interesting and that can bring that passion out in you. Because if you as an individual have been asked to build some sort of quality practice into an organization, you need to be invested, you need to be bought in on it, you need to be so passionate about it that you can begin to see a vision for what that good can look like and how that can be realized. Hopefully, it'd be an organization that you're not left to your own devices and told you got a tiny budget, you got to get all this done, 6 months, job done. I wouldn't take that job. If there was enough there that I was bought in on it, I could see the opportunity was worth the risk of taking a role. And I think it would be a risk to take a role that was to create something because you've got a lot of expectations to temper. You've got your own, you've got, you've got the expectations of a company. Oh, you've got 6 months, you'll be sorted, you can get it all set up, job done. I think there's a lot of precedent of where organizations have sold things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
all of those things are worth looking at. But I think ultimately, if there is that spark, if there is that excitement, that thing that I'm bought in on, that is the foundation on which I can start to work because then I've got the opportunity to find those allies to sort of share a common vision, to build an actual solid platform that isn't just me,
Mm.
so that we've got a quality foundation in a culture that we can then grow upon.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's for me it's what the first lesson I would sort of suggest is there isn't a cookie cutter approach to it. What you've done in previous roles won't necessarily fit verbatim in the next place you go, but there might be some bits that you can look at. But the first thing you need to do is really get under the covers. Find out how the company works, find out what the ethos is, find out whether they've had any. It may not be a startup; it may be a slightly bigger company that's had failed testing practices before, or they've made a decision to spin out the testing team from within the development teams, or it
Yeah.
depends what that exact context is. Where you feel you could add help, learn about the scars they've got, learn about the intentions they have. Are you moving to a place? Have you come into a company that is all about automation? That wouldn't necessarily be a job that I'd take, for instance. But there might be this thing of we need lots of SDETs, we need to automate everything. Right. Well, how do we come in as a quality leader and look at the bigger picture? How do we educate the business on what the right quality practice approaches are? Look at things like center of excellences. Look at, as Russell mentioned, whether you're going to hire perms or whether you're going to go to outsource partners that can build the practice at speed to scale to start with, and then you bring in your perms as you go along. Different ways to approach it, but it's about understanding what the intentions are.
You said COE, you mean centers of experience. So,
Well, yes, we can. Yeah. I was using the term just to get a
Not
reaction from
Church of
you, Russell.
England.
yeah. No.
Just to see Russell's face for those of you that are not on camera.
Yeah,
Use everyone.
I'm not a fan of centers of excellence because generally they're not excellent. Um,
Communities of practice. It might be a practice lead type
Yeah,
situation instead, but still.
the concepts of them are all, I think, wonderful. Don't get me wrong. The idea of kind of like being able to kind of help support people with what good looks like, I think it's the noblest and the rightest thing. It's just my experience of dealing with centers of excellence is it's usually a group of people that don't do and sit in a silo elsewhere. So I'm a skeptic. It doesn't mean it can't be done better than that, and there are some good ones out there, I know. But from what we were just talking about there, I was just thinking about kind of in the world that we're coming into. I'm imagining this context using my biases, thinking either it's a startup type situation or it's, as Simon said, it's somewhere that developers do the sort of quality of it now, or quality wasn't a separate practice. In which case, it is about understanding in my head what is done, advocating, building a vision with those people, finding out why you've been brought in. Is it that the moment developers do unit testing, that's it? But it's to find out a little bit more of that sort of world, get some allies within the community that exists, be it engineers, be it BAs, whatever the roles within your organization. Again, from bigger companies with no separate practice, or startups with just 6 people doing everything. It's just kind of build some allies, set a goal or vision with as many people as you can, the leaders or the people doers, depending on context, to get buy-in to actually kind of a story. I was going to say vision. I think vision may be overused these days. So I'm going to say to a story or to something to kind of that you can get people to ramp behind, that you can get people to lead towards, that people buy into, seeing it adding value. That may end up being recruitment of people to fulfill certain roles. It may be that you've got an ops team, so it's about getting the right monitoring and other things in data to help drive practices. It's all sorts of different sides of the angle to help build in sort of like quality mindset. I think it's what you said, Simon. So yeah, building that sort of quality view holistically from the idea to the production, but building it good enough and working with these stakeholders, be them person does 12 jobs or be it person that does one, to actually guide, lead, put a quality spin into the narratives that they may already have. It may just be editing and working with their own other people's visions, but just try and kind of I can't think of a better word, preach the value of quality, the value of quality engineering, the value of test engineering, whatever it is that the company needs, but just help sell. So you've been brought in, as Chris said, for money, for our reason. So, if you can actually do add to that, and there's at least one ally that you must have in the org already, the person who hired you. So, yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about sort of sunny day scenarios we've been brought in. We talked about enthusiasm. How do we cope or what do we do with that enthusiasm if we come up with a plan, we've costed it all, we might even be implementing the plan and the company go, sorry, change of direction, monetary budget funds, you can't bring as many people in, you've got to use what you've got, you're the resources, the tools you wanted to buy have no budget for that. How well do we pivot, or what goes through our minds in order to still keep that enthusiasm, believe in the company vision, but have to pivot?
I think the first thing for me would be, when you create that plan in the first place, you create your gold plated scenario where you get everything you want, but you also create that minimum viable product. What is the minimum team that I need in place to help me get moving? Whether that be, you need a lead automation tester, you need an architect, you need a tester, QE, whatever you want to call them, that's going to do some exploratory and find out about the system. What's that minimum to make a dent, to start showing the value on a smaller scale, and then use the proof in the pudding to then try and prove that you need a few more. I've been in situations, when I took on the head of QA role, as it was then here, was very much, you've got no headcount increase. You need to do what you can with what you have. Build your org out with that. No increase in heads. And I had to take people that were at lead levels and make them into managers, even though they weren't really ready for it. And it's a challenge because you're hamstrung with what you have. But it's about showing what value you can do with that limitation, and then proving that to get successful, and then hopefully getting the buy-in later on once you've made some successes. But it's taking that step-by-step approach.
Yeah, always ask for more than you need. Always ask for more than the minimum. I think it's the classical thing. Look for where you can adapt. So we mentioned tooling. There's a lot of good open source out there. So you look where you can save, where you can cut, and you obviously have I don't know if I'm the only one here, but I can imagine that most of us as testers have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, a plan F, and it goes on, because when you're asking for anything of management teams, I've rarely ever got someone to say, "Yep, do what you want." Carte blanche, blank check. I've always had compromise, negotiation, debate, change. Is it Napoleon and all the rest of it saying sort of, or Wellington, that said something like, battle plans don't survive the first action. It's kind of that, whatever you want, you'll never get, or you'll find out you didn't want it anyway. It's never mind someone else not telling you can't. You will discover that it wasn't the best idea. So it's building plans that aren't all dependent. And as Simon said, it's almost like experimenting. So, do it in one team, do it in one area, do it in one place. So just, have it so you can dial back the scale of that impact. It
You've
may
also you've
Yeah.
also got the unpredictability of you might have a plan where you need to bring these first roles in. The people you bring in for those roles may not fit the mold exactly in how you intended, and therefore they might, not intentionally, but they might take things off in a slightly different direction, which takes you on a different path. So as Russell said, have the multiple plans, but even them, you need to fork them off as and when things change. And it could be that you have ABC all the way to F, but you also have F1, F2, F3, F4, because there's all these different permutations that could happen based on that. It just ends up being a minefield.
There's every chance you haven't got people as well. Like you may have no budget for no people, and you might have to
Exactly.
come
So you do it
in
on your own.
and build up a quality practice with what is there,
Yeah.
and then you can't do that by yourself. You have to do that by coaching through examples, leading by example, and showing things off, and in getting the buy-in with the people that you have to start with. Show value that way, and then maybe if you get the opportunity to bring people in, you can build upon those things. Quality culture, as we all know, isn't just in our testers or quality engineers. It's an end-to-end cycle, and so I would expect quality to be breathing and living through a whole organization as a goal, and for wanting to get stuck in those bits. But to come back to one of your first points, Simon, I couldn't. You said you made many points.
And made so many, yeah.
Would be, well, what if the ball game changes based on what you thought you were going to get? Sometimes, and not always, but sometimes we also have to admit this isn't something we can do. Sometimes that isn't a good fit for you. Sometimes you're not a good fit for them. Being humble about those things, pivoting on things, it can be hard, difficult to sort of deal with. But I think we have to accept if we take on an exciting challenge, it's not always going to pay off for us. I wouldn't just rage quit because I wasn't going to get get the budget that I'd asked for. But you interview with a company, very often you're painting the best version of you, that picture, and they're probably trying to sell the company to you so that you'll want to come to them also. And there is a bit of trial and error. We've talked a lot about testing and experimenting and stuff, and I think there is a bit of that as well. I think probably we're all quite stubborn.
No.
but I think you can lay a good foundation and accept that you might not be there to see it through as well.
I think there's always that challenge that you might get that conversation earlier on, and when you say, asking for help from your person that's brought you in, saying, look, these are the ideas I have, what do you think? And you may get that response back, well, you're the expert, you tell me. But yeah, but you're the one that holds the budget strings. So what's going to work for us? And you're right, there might be that challenge where they go, well, I don't think your direction is what we wanted. But there are opportunities to collaborate and almost coach upwards at that point and work with them to try and change their mindset. That may not happen. It may not be worthwhile, but it's always worth that attempt. And there's also that thing of reach out to the community and talk to people that have been in similar leadership type roles that may be able to offer some tips and hints on how you could move forward. And there may be some things you've not thought about. You may be stuck in, well, I've always done it this way, therefore I'm going to try and do it that way, or something similar. Whereas actually there might be something completely left field that you'd not thought about, which actually will work really well, and you can still drive that change forward. So it's then about finding those other ideas out, do your research, talk to people in the community, and you'll soon find there might be some opportunities to change. But equally, you might get to that point, as Chris said, where you just go, you know what, this is not for me. I can't do this.
I'm going to do something against my natural instinct. I'm going to be an optimist.
Wow.
So bear with me. This is unheard of.
Podcast first.
Sometimes those forced changes actually create some innovation, create some ideas, create some other ways of doing things that actually can make better plans, more efficient plans, more effective plans, and your leaders and your colleagues can actually help you do a better job. We all come in with an idea of what perfect or good would be, what we want to do. But actually, the team viewpoint, the feedback loops can often be constructive in terms of refining, because ultimately, releasing software is a team sport. So, whilst we have a quality angle, there's much more to it than quality. It's got to be commercially viable, it's got to actually be buildable. So, we do have to do this as a team thing. So, sometimes, as much as I want brilliant quality, having those debates about choices that we have to make can lead to some interesting discoveries and prioritizations of features, functions, other things, and how we do things, who does things. I'm not precious necessarily with who sometimes. It's sometimes the outcome that's most important. So it's interesting that sometimes the compromises you have to make, whilst they can compromise too far, which is a lot of what we're talking about there, they can actually sometimes come out with a positive outcome, a better outcome, tooling that's open source that you love, a new approach to doing something, a partnership with a third party vendor, or a new colleague that you've never would have thought of collaborating with, but suddenly you become double trouble. Together you're kind of causing chaos because you're building this great ally now that you can change the world with, but you never thought that would be possible. So it's interesting that challenges can create those rage quit situations, but I've seen them where they've actually created positivity. God help me.
I was going to echo, in fact, Russell pinned me to the post in unmuting that, yeah, I think that sometimes these curveballs, we may have a plan of, building our team, getting people in, but then when we push comes to shove with our minimal viable product or minimal shippable risk or whatever, then we might work with one developer and tap into something that they didn't know they had, and absolutely spark off each other and challenge each other and come up with new ideas, different ideas. As we've said, using open source, we come in with our ideas, but actually getting ideas off other people can actually build something bigger and stronger and have more input, because you're not forcing external people into the environment that you're doing. You're building up possibly from the inside. And so therefore, as long as you get that cadence and get the buy-in from those people, you can almost build something stronger and better using those tools, if you're forced to have those curveballs and not have that sunny day scenario, and just have it as you are. Because sometimes bringing people in can cause more friction because they're an unknown, just as we ourselves can cause friction by coming up with the idea. But as Russ, going back many minutes ago, when Russell said building those foundations, getting that support, getting that first follower, and then building up from there.
Constraints can lead to creativity, can't they? Sometimes you've got to think outside the box, try some different things.
Yeah, it can lead to invention and creativity and experiments because you haven't got a choice. And, is it that sort of mother of invention, I think, sometimes adversity. But it's interesting because, like, one of the other things, some of the problems we talk about is training. It is research. That's time, but actually, rather than getting consultants in, rather than getting extra people in, it grows your skill as the leader because you have to pick up that slack. You take on another role or you take on another activity. It may not be what you wanted to do. Maybe you didn't want to become an expert on contract testing, but because there's a need for it, you end up doing that. So it can sometimes create opportunities that benefit you. Sometimes it can push you in directions you do not want to go. And that's the challenge, isn't it? And it's about that balance. But with all these, you've got to figure out whether it's the right place for you, whether it's the right team for you, whether it's the right direction. Because what can start off being perfect can end up being less than perfect. And it's all just about, go with the ride, adapt with it, learn from it, but understand there's points. And there's points in which, you stay, and there's points in which you go, okay, great, I'm not for this journey anymore. My journey's somewhere else.
It is sometimes about, testing the appetite from the business. With the proposals, like you say, Russell, it might be you take on a role that you didn't necessarily originally be hired for by doing lots of research yourself. Or you could go to them and say, I'll give you two options. We can get a contractor in or a consultant in for 3 months at this rate, and they'll accelerate the research process discovery phase before we start bringing people in. or you can let me do it. It will take 6 months, but I'll do it on myself by myself. I'll work with stakeholders. I'll work with the business. I'll understand what's going on myself, and then we'll make decisions. And sometimes you'll find that they've got the appetite to get it done quickly, so they'll stump up an initial funding to try and help you move forward. It's about giving the options and making sure you don't go with a one plan that's the only option we can do is this. You need to have those alternatives that will give people a slightly different steer. And you're measuring their risk appetite by what you offer them.
That's a wonderful place, I think, to end on for a change. Why don't we wrap up there and say thank you very much to David, Chris, and Simon for the lovely insights into kind of building a team, building from scratch, and some of the challenges and positives that come out of those opportunities. And say thank you to our sponsors, Saffron QA, once again. And say you can reach us contact us at testingpeers.com. And if you want to learn more about the Testing Peers conference, you can go to peerscon.com and you'll be able to see more of what we're planning in 2025.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.